Imagine you've saved $1.8 million for retirement, but keep thinking, what if it's not enough every time you consider retiring? I'm going to show you exactly how Mark and Diane went from having that same fear to complete confidence in their retirement decision. In this video, we'll walk through their real numbers and how our 3-step process helped them make this transformation. The difference came down to doing 3 things many couples skip: getting clear on their retirement vision, building the funding plan to support it, and testing the approach against real-world scenarios. By the end of this, you'll see how the same process could give you the same confidence. Now, the example I share today is adjusted to protect our clients' privacy, but it's based on real patterns we see. Regardless of your own numbers, you can apply these same ideas and frameworks to your own situation. Let's meet the couple this plan was built for. Mark is 64, Diane is 62. And with retirement just around the corner, they're asking the question that keeps many successful couples awake at night. Can we actually retire at the end of this year and stay retired? They built a strong foundation with just over $2.3 million in total net worth. Most of their savings were in pre-tax retirement accounts, like Mark's 401k and Diane's 403b. That's great for long-term growth, but it means every dollar they withdraw in retirement can be fully taxable. They also had around $315,000 in Roth IRAs, which can give them tax-free flexibility later on. Plus, about $220,000 in a joint brokerage account. Easy to access, but taxable when gains are realized. They kept about $50,000 in a checking account for short-term needs. And their home, fully paid off, worth around $540,000. From the outside, it looked like they were ready. But knowing what they built is just one part of understanding if they're ready to retire. Therefore, we needed to map out what they wanted their retirement to actually look like. Mark and Diane had a date circled on the calendar for their retirement at the end of this year. Mark would be retiring at age 64 and Diane at 62. The first number they gave us was $7,500 per month. That would cover the essentials, everything from groceries and home repairs to birthdays, dinners out, and weekends with the grandkids. This wasn't about upgrading to some extravagant lifestyle, just maintaining the life they built with a little breathing room built in. They also hoped to travel, not just once a year, but regularly. Diane dreamed of seeing the Smoky Mountains in the fall. Mark talked about driving the New England coast and visiting some national parks. But they wanted to be realistic about when they'd be most active. So we set aside $12,000 a year for travel for the first 8 years of retirement. Their cars were also a part of the plan. Their current SUV was showing its age, so they planned to replace it twice. Once a few years after retiring, and again 8 years later. Healthcare was a major factor. Mark turns 65 the same year he retires, so he'll go straight onto Medicare. Diane will have a 2-year gap, so we built in $1,100 per month for her until Medicare kicks in. After that, we assumed about $650 per month per person once they're both on Medicare. There were also things they wanted to do for others, and helping their grandsons with college was one of them. They weren't looking to cover the entire cost, but wanted to contribute enough to make a difference. So we built in $3,000 per year for the next 10 years. And then there was one more thing they wanted us to plan for, even though most people would rather not think about it: long-term care. They'd seen firsthand what it costs when families aren't prepared for this reality. So we planned for $75,000 per year for 2 years each, later in life. Not because it's guaranteed, but because ignoring it would have meant ignoring the clarity and confidence that comes with being prepared. So when you line it all up, their monthly lifestyle, their travel dreams, their healthcare realities, and the legacy they want to leave, Mark and Diane finally had a clear picture of what retirement would cost, which is step 1 in our process. But now that we know the costs, we need to look at what income we'd have coming in to fund them. So right now, Mark is still working full-time as a mechanical engineer. He earns about $100,000 per year. Diane works part-time at a nonprofit. She brings in around $45,000 a year. Their income today covers everything. It's helped them save, pay off their home, and support their kids and grandkids. But both jobs end soon. They're retiring at the end of this year. So what happens when the paychecks stop? The first big piece is Social Security. And this was something they'd already thought through carefully. Mark wanted to wait until age 67, his full retirement age. He liked the idea of locking in a higher benefit and knew it would also give Diane more protection down the road. Diane felt differently. If Mark's gonna wait, fine. But I'm fine the year we retire. I wanna enjoy it. In the end, they both decided to file in year 3 of retirement, 2028, when Mark is 67 and Diane is 65. That year, they'll begin receiving about $5,000 per month combined. Mark's benefit at his full retirement age comes to about $3,000 per month. Diane's benefit when she claims at her age 65 is about $2,000 per month. Remember, this wasn't just about maximizing their Social Security, it was about creating a foundation that they could count on. That shift changes everything. Once those benefits start, the pressure on their investments drops and their plan gets stronger. In the meantime, there's also a smaller piece of income. Mark plans to work part-time, maybe a few days a week at a local golf course. Nothing intense, just a way to stay active and cover a bit of spending. So we built in $800 per month for the first 3 years of retirement, just enough to help bridge the early years before Social Security kicks in. So here's the full picture. Full-time income ends this year. Part-time work helps early on. And by year 3, Social Security picks up a major portion of the load. This is step 2 in our process, building a plan to fund their retirement. But now that we had their income mapped out, we need to figure out the second half of this step, which is how much their investments would actually need to cover. Therefore, we had to step back and look at how it all comes together year by year. This is the retirement cash flows summary, a line-by-line view of what's coming in, what's going out, and how much their savings need to cover. We'll walk through it left to right, just like you'd read it. Let's start with 2026, their first full year of retirement. Their paychecks are gone, and at this point, there's just one source of income, Mark's part-time job. That brings in about $800 per month or $9,600 for the year. But even though most of their income is stopped, their expenses haven't. Everything else, groceries, travel, healthcare, has to come from their savings. Their everyday spending starts out at about $7,500 per month. That covers the essentials, groceries, utilities, home maintenance, birthdays, dinners out, all the things that make life feel normal. You'll notice this number grows each year. That's inflation, the slow climb in prices that happens whether we plan for it or not. What costs $100 today might cost $130 a decade from now. Now, we add on the things that make retirement more than just survival. First, that $12,000 per year in travel, just for the first 8 years. Then, the 2 modest car purchases, with the first one coming in 2027. And $3,000 per year for 10 years to help their grandsons with college. Some years, like 2027, are bigger with both travel and a vehicle replacement. And next comes something most people forget to plan for, taxes. Because most of their savings are in pre-tax accounts, every dollar they withdraw to pay for expenses shows up as income. So even if they're only spending $7,500 per month, they may need to pull closer to $8,500 per month just to cover the tax bill. In this plan, we started with a simple withdrawal strategy, pulling evenly from taxable, Roth, and pre-tax buckets. Think of it like scooping from all 3 jars at once. It's simple, but not always tax smart. We'll save that conversation for another video. Now, when we add it all up, lifestyle expenses, travel, healthcare, taxes, their total spending in 2026 is about $137,000. So if they only have $9,600 coming in and they're spending $137,000, their investments need to fill the gap. That means pulling $127,000 from their portfolio in the first year. But here's the good news. That number changes over time. In 2028, both their Social Security checks begin, adding $5,000 per month of reliable income. After that, the pressure on their portfolio starts to ease. Travel slows down, healthcare shifts, and the gap gets smaller. But in those early years, 2026 and 2027, their savings are doing the heavy lifting. So now we know what their portfolio needed to cover each year, but we still need to see if those numbers were sustainable. Therefore, we had to take those numbers and compare them to their portfolio over time. That's what this next chart shows. It goes year by year and compares how much they need to take out of their savings versus what they have. We call this the withdrawal rate. But really, it's just a way to measure how much of their savings they're using each year. Think of it like scooping ice cream from a bowl. If you take bigger scoops, it means the bowl empties faster. Take smaller scoops, and it can last you all afternoon. Let's start on the left, their first full year of retirement. They'll need to withdraw about $127,000 from their portfolio. With around $1.9 million saved, that's about 6.7%. The next year, it jumps a bit. Still no Social Security yet, and they're traveling more. That's normal early in retirement. But here's the good news. In year 3, both their Social Security checks begin. That reliable income lowers the pressure on their savings. From here, through their late 70s and early 80s, they're only withdrawing around 3 to 4% each year. For most retirees, that's a very manageable number, especially when the plan is organized. You might notice these bars get taller again later on. But that doesn't mean something's wrong with their plan. It's not because they're overspending, it's because they're required to start taking money out of their pre-tax accounts. These are called required minimum distributions, and they're mandatory once you reach your early 70s. Even if they don't need the money, the IRS requires them to withdraw it, and that shows up here as a rising withdrawal rate. So yes, the bars get bigger, but it's not a sign of plan weakness. It's just the tax system doing what it does. And see those really big bars at the end of the plan? Those are the long-term care costs we made sure to set aside money for. So what does all this tell us? The early years include some bigger scoops, but once Social Security kicks in and travel slows down, the withdrawals shrink and stay stable for a long time. For Mark and Diane, that felt like the right trade-off. They wanted to enjoy the early years when they're healthy and excited without the constant fear of overspending. But these withdrawal rates assume steady returns year after year, which never happens in reality. Therefore, we had to test their plan against unpredictable market conditions to see if it would still work. That's why we test it using what's called a Monte Carlo analysis. We run their plan through 1,000 different market scenarios. Some with great returns, others begin with crashes like 2008. Some have high inflation, some have deflation. We're asking, what happens to Mark and Diane's plan if the future doesn't look like the past? This can give them something that can be more valuable than a guarantee. It gives them confidence based on real data. They can see how their plan performs across a wide range of real-world conditions. And even with all that uncertainty, Mark and Diane's baseline plan, with all their real-life goals, scored a 97% probability of success. That means in 970 out of 1,000 scenarios, they didn't run out of money. Now, what we found is that a 97% success rate often means there's room to do more. If a plan works in 970 out of 1,000 scenarios, it might be leaving something on the table. Maybe they could travel more, spend more on everyday life, or simply have more confidence about their choices. So we started asking, what if Mark and Diane wanted to live a little more boldly? How much more could they spend and still sleep well at night? The first thing they mentioned was travel. At $12,000 per year, they could take nice trips. But what if they really wanted to splurge on this part of retirement? We tested increasing their annual travel budget from $12,000 to $30,000 just for the first 8 years. That's an $18,000 per year increase in spending, focused on their most active years. They talked about road trips across the country, visiting family without hesitation, and seeing places they've always dreamed of while they still feel young enough to enjoy it. The result? A 92% success rate. Still very strong. And now the plan reflects not just what they need, but what they want. The travel test showed us something important. They had flexibility. They didn't need to be counting every dollar every time they wanted to spend a little more on a trip or an event. But we also want to look at their everyday lifestyle. Even with enhanced travel, they were still being pretty conservative with their day-to-day spending. What if they loosened up there too? So when we looked at their everyday life expenses, we increased them from $7,500 to $8,500, an extra $12,000 per year. This change brings their success rate down to 73%, meaning in most scenarios, the plan still works. But in the others, a few adjustments may be needed. For Mark and Diane, this wasn't about needing to spend more. It was about permission to spend more. That extra room could go toward impromptu weekend trips, saying yes to one more round of golf, or just not second-guessing every dinner out. It's not about spending more to spend more. It's about living with less pressure. And even at 73%, they've got a plan that can adapt. Then we tested the edge, not because they planned to spend that much, but because they wanted to know their boundaries. At $9,000 per month, the success rate dropped to 61%. That's still more than half the scenarios, but it's a clear indicator that the risk is rising. Now they know, if spending ever starts creeping toward that number, it's a signal, not a panic moment, to check in and see if they need to course correct. Mark had one final question. What if I decide not to work part-time at all? We removed his $800 per month income, reset the original numbers, and ran the plan again. The success rate? Almost unchanged. For Mark, this part-time work was never about needing the money, but he said he'd be lying if he didn't have that thought creeping up in the back of his mind. This helped put that thought to bed and made sure he could have the freedom to only work part-time if he enjoyed it. That's step 3, stress testing against different scenarios. And when we test a plan like this, not just with numbers, but with real decisions, we see that success isn't about perfection. It's about having options and seeing ahead of time what changes are worth making and which ones aren't. Even in the lower success scenarios, Mark and Diane have strong safety nets. Social Security covers most of their essentials. Their home is paid off. Taxes and healthcare are already built into the plan. And they've tested the what-ifs before they happen. That's the power of clarity. When you've seen the full picture, when you've tested what's possible, you can stop asking, can we retire? And start asking, how do we want to live? And if this helped you change how you think about your retirement, subscribe for more real-world retirement planning insights. We make videos every week that help guide you through all the challenges of retirement. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.